All right, so I assume we are live. Hello, everyone, whoever has joined, and we're still waiting for more people to come in. But then, welcome to the Thai Alternate Funding Special Investment Interest Group. Uh, uh, this special interest group that we have is one of the newest addition to the Thai Global's uh, various SIGs and comes with a very interesting thought process and the interest to the entrepreneurs, that is investment beyond equity funding, as the topic for the discussion today as well speaks. So I will probably give a quick introduction about the SIG, and we'll move on to introducing the panel thereon, and then looking forward to a great discussion after that. But then, just to give you a quick overview of the special interest group that we are talking about. Uh, what we are here for is basically assisting the entrepreneurs for or with the different types of funding mechanism, which goes beyond the equity funding, non-dilutive, uh, in various geographies for that matter, considering that Thai works across several geographies, and also understanding that the alternate investment that we are talking about is very jurisdictional based, uh, which means that the debts, the grants, the various other sources of alternate investment that we are talking about is very jurisdictional based. Today, we will be covering largely how it goes in the Indian jurisdiction, and we will be covering many of the other sessions for various other geographies as we move forward in the SIG's life over this year. But then the charter that we have says that we intend to bring in all the resources which are non-dilutive and non-equity based funding classes for the entrepreneurs, make them available to the entrepreneurs, and also bring in experts like the ones we have on our panel today to help all the entrepreneurs understand how all those different funding sources can be approached for, and how entrepreneurs can be ready and further go ahead and avail those resources. So that's what largely the vision and the charter of Thai Alternate Funding Group is. I've already summarized it, so I will move forward. When we talk about the coverage from the perspective of the non-equity based financing, you may see the points on the left side of the slide, which covers the grants, both private as well as the government based grants, endowments, venture debt, bank debts, revenue based financing, corporate social responsibility or the CSR funding, both corporate as well as the government, the crowdfunding, and many other similar sources. That's what largely we will be covering, as it is already evident and I've spoken about. The equity and venture capital stays out of the purview of this SIG and will perhaps not be covered in the discussions as well. We probably may have a quick comparison as we move forward in this discussion, but that's what largely this SIG is about. What we have now is the panel, and I'm very happy to introduce the panelists today. You see Girish on the screen. He was supposed to be the moderator today. I'm filling in for Girish for some unforeseen reasons. He's not able to take the discussion forward today. I got the opportunity. But then for the other panelists, I'm very happy to introduce a very accomplished set of panelists we have for the discussion today. Shanti Mohan, as you can see here. And before I speak about Shanti's non-dilutive avatar, I believe nobody in the Indian startup ecosystem perhaps does not know about Let's Venture. Uh, so she brings that legacy of being the pioneer in the startup funding ecosystem in the country. Today, she represents us as a venture partner for N+1 Capital, which is a revenue-based financing or fund. Following, we have Ishpreet Gandhi. Ishpreet Gandhi is the founder and managing partner of Stride Ventures. Stride is making a lot of ripples and waves in the venture debt ecosystem in the country, one of the pioneers. Ishpreet also comes with a huge legacy working with a lot of banking institutions, right from Standard Chartered, Yes Bank, IDFC, and many more. He has worked with many of the other funds and mobilized financing, debt-based financing for many startups in his previous avatar, and now doing that with Stride as well. So welcome, Shanti and Ishpreet. And then we have Shoma Chattopadhyay. Shoma is the head of incubation and mentoring for Venture Center based out of Pune. So hold on. No, I'm still trying to find few of the things which, as I said, I'm filling up. So please bear with me. All right. So yeah, so I think we are ready to go. So welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion today. I will probably stop sharing my screen and okay, there you go. Ready to have this wonderful chat on the topic of non-dilutive, non-equity based funding today. I perhaps will like to set a quick context further to what I've already spoken about. We already have seen how the equity financing has evolved in the Indian startup ecosystem, though the scenario is global, but since we are covering India today, how it has evolved over last about a decade and a half, 2 decades. But then venture capital, as we all know, comes with its own caveats, right? One, it is dilutive in nature. Second, it's not that easily accessible at different stages of venture growth, for that matter. And also, not always is the most feasible option for the entrepreneurs, right? Sometimes there's a requirement of funding which is quick in nature and also probably temporary in nature, right? Where the venture capital comes more in terms of the long-term patient capital. Venture debt comes very handy, but obviously has its own venture debt, revenue-based financing, and many other things have their own, I would say, easier access pertaining to certain conditions that startups do furnish. At the same time, if we are talking about the grants, we are talking about the CSR-based funding. Again, as I said, based on the nature of the business, have comparatively easier access, non-dilutive, and perhaps much easier than what venture capital or the equity dilution would bring for the entrepreneurs. So having said that, we would move on to the conversation, and I perhaps will take the liberty to start asking Shoma first, because between the revenue-based financing, venture debt, and the early stage CSR grants and other things, probably the incubation comes first, right? If you look at the stages of the growth of a startup, right? And Shoma, since you are part of an incubation incubation center / incubation programs, right? At that very early stage, there are a couple of things that I would like to quickly ask, right? One, what do you feel is the depth of the non-equity based capital that play in India, and how it helps the early stage entrepreneurs, and what are different modes and models, and also the different tools that are available for the entrepreneurs to access?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Maybe, we will break it up into few parts, because if I answer all these things together, it is going to take almost 10-15 minutes. So maybe I'll just answer the first part, and maybe in the next, after discussions with all others, maybe take up the few of the funding schemes as well. So from our experience, I would say over a period of years, so we are here for almost 14 years, where we support startups at very early stage. Almost we have supported 600 deep science and tech-based startups, and our strength lies in science and engineering-based ventures, which are in the areas of science, areas of, say, healthcare, medtech, engineering, or clean energy, agrotech. So what we have seen in supporting these startups, so as I said, we come at a very early stage, means very early, really early, when they have concepts in mind and they are just putting together their ideation, they are putting together a plan for validating their POC, we come at that stage. So, helping them from that stage to all the way to the pilots, trials, and, testing, all those kind of stages, which is quite long a journey because deep science and tech startups takes quite a long. We have seen that the non-equity, non-dilutive based funding coming up actually quite strong. And in fact, right now, I would say it's much stronger than ever, where all the government, non-government, various other, government can be again divided into the ones that operates nationally, ones that operates bilaterally. So it kinds of has joined that bandwagon of deep tech ecosystem that to plug the gap that existed earlier. And now one can secure funds for running their business starting from as early as I said, the conceptualization ideation stage, where probably before you will be only having startups to use either their individual savings or the 3Fs that we commonly know, friends, family, fools, all that. But now, right now, we do have government support coming in and helping them going to the stages before by the time they are ready to actually go for the private investments in any other modes or instrument that is possible. And it is not only in India, but as I said, that one can also leverage the multilateral international accelerators, etc. And that gives them very early on an opportunity to explore the international market as well. So they can actually reach out to those regions to develop collaborations, partnerships. And also this funding has given them the access to different kind of opportunities for such kind of things. So I would actually love to show just one slide on to just show the landscape of exactly how the funding looks like. And before I can go, further. Is my screen visible?
It is.
Yeah. So this is what I was actually trying to explain. So if I break it up, the startup journey in the parts that I have mentioned here, the R&D stage, the POC, the seed funding, early stage and all. Based on our understanding, we have seen typically between 5 to 15 lakh, you can cover your R&D, pre-POC, proof of concept, your first draft of prototype. And the kind of funding opportunities that we see more and more is probably some kind of fellowship, some kind of early stage POC prototyping grant. Going over further, you have little mid-stage grants, then also the government operated seed funds, which are not necessarily always non-dilutive because we operate as equity. Others also can operate as a debt and maybe CCDs as well. So that kind of a definition is there. But the CSR grants, India, as I said, all the other multilateral programs come into picture. And there are some very large government programs to take you all the way to manufacturing and limited scale manufacturing before you can hit the trials and the stages. So this is an example of how the funding landscape looks like. Of course, there is a difficult zone in as well, wherein probably the Ministry of Science and Technology or Niti Aayog or all the kind of funding stops at certain point of time. And there is still a depth of value which we need to fill up with some private investment. If they are lucky, they are able to raise and they are able to move forward. But yes, the first stages are definitely covered by such kind of funding over here.
Very interesting. So yeah, so I think picking up on this, I probably would like to come back to you and ask what are the different sources that can be availed by the entrepreneurs in a little moment. But let's pick on the next point of the other asset classes, and we have the specialists on the panel sitting today to discuss those pieces. And coming to Shanti, revenue-based financing is kind of a little new to Indian startup landscape, right? What brings N+1 into this new turf that they are entering as revenue-based financiers? And what is it that a firm like N+1 look for when they are investing in a startup with the revenue-based financing that you do?
Thanks for having me on the panel. So just to quickly talk about it, why revenue-based financing today in today's market? It's because, in the last 10 years, I think the venture ecosystem has invested and built large companies today, right? Because revenue-based financing is not applicable to very early stage companies. It is not applicable to pre-revenue companies, right? So really, it is growth capital, right? So if it is actually growth-oriented financing instrument, which is aligned to the growth of the company. And that's how you have to look at revenue-based financing, right? Second is, the way N+1 has structured the RBF instrument is that it is not a monthly fixed repayment, but it's a percentage of your revenue which they kind of attach to, right? So if your revenues are growing much faster, you actually have the ability to repay that amount much faster than what you would typically do if it was a fixed coupon or a fixed method of payment, right? That is the second one. Third is, of course, the company does not have to be VC backed, right? And that basically means that you have to be an independent company which is revenue generating, which has gross margins, percentage of gross margins, right? And which is actually a growing company where you want capital not for investing into R&D or not for investing into something which is more long term, but it is more helping you with growth capital, right? So where you really need a little bit of that additional capital in order to fuel growth within the company. And of course, this does not exclude, when I say it is growth capital, it does not exclude steady or low growth companies, right? It is more a percentage of how you look at investing. But really, Rakesh, if you look at why revenue-based financing today, RBF is pretty popular in the US today. And the reason it is starting to become popular in India is because the ecosystem has reached a point when there is enough scale built into companies have seen growth, right? The entrepreneurial ecosystem has become a lot more mature, right? And we actually need alternate sources of funding outside equity. Like you rightly said, equity is the most expensive instrument a company can use in order to raise funds, right? And you need to look at how do you fuel the growth of companies with alternate sources of capital. It could be revenue based, it could be supply chain financing, it could be invoice based financing, it could be venture debt, right? So those are the different alternate sources of capital which are starting to emerge for the founders in India today.
Yeah, these are interesting times for the entrepreneurs, I would say. But if I hear it right, what you said, for the revenue-based financing, is it necessary that the startups do not have to be venture-backed?
No. So the venture-backed is not a requirement. The requirement is that you have to have a consistent revenue over the last 1 year, right? So the way the evaluation of a company happens when you look at RBF, right? It is evaluated on 3 parameters. One is, of course, the debt evaluation, right? Where you're actually looking at, does the company have sustainable revenues or repeated revenues in the last 1 year, right? Typically, what N+1 looks at is 10 crores of revenue ARR, right? Second is you have to have a 25% gross margin because you have to be able to return the capital, right, over the consistent period of time. So those are the debt the way you look at the debt parameters. Second is they also have a VC lens to it. And when I say VC lens to it, they're also looking of quality of revenues, right? So if it is a company where you think that it's a B2B company and they have about 10 crores of revenue coming in from 3 clients, then the quality of revenue is a little bit lower, right? Because then there is a higher risk that one of the clients dropping off could impact the revenue of the company, right? So you also look at quality of revenue, you look at founder quality, right? Because you also want to look at the ability to return the capital back, right? Understood. So though it is venture debt, it is not purely a venture debt kind of measured model. It is actually, they also look at VC lens, right? And third is, of course, they have a new age fintech lens to it, right? And when I say new age fintech lens, is they actually look at your GST and your bank returns of the company. Because when you're recovering capital, you're actually recovering it looking at the way your MIS is running within the company. So it's a little bit more detailed in terms of how you actually would evaluate your company for RBF.
I would like to come back and dig on that a little bit more from an entrepreneur's perspective, right? So I would like you to wear the entrepreneur's hat and tell when is the right time for them. But I'll come back on that discussion. Let me head to Ishpreet now. Ishpreet, Stride has been making a lot of waves in the market, right? You have been one of the pioneers in the venture debt in India. What is the threshold that the venture debt works on, or the firms like you work on when you are looking at investing in the firms? I think probably the first question would be why venture debt at all, right? And second is the threshold that you would be looking at in a startup or a business while you are looking to invest in them.
Thanks, Rakesh. Thanks, Ty, for getting me on the panel. And the fact that we're discussing alternate financing talks about the maturity of the startup ecosystem, what Shanti spoke about. So from just to give you probably a larger perspective, Rakesh, and then we'll come more on venture debt. I think the whole point, what we are trying to achieve, all of us together, is to ensure that, as you rightly said, that the founders have lesser dilution or next to nothing dilution when they raise alternate funds of capital. And that's the point of taking it. And I think it's very heartening to see the whole ecosystem shaping up in a manner in which it's getting a lot of professionals. So I've been a professional myself till 3 years back. A lot of professionals coming into the ecosystem and trying to initiate newer things. And when they come in, they have better avenues to go to in terms of ensuring that they get the initial capital, which might not be a venture capital. So I think overall, how our instrument works, to be specific to that, venture debt is a slight differentiation in terms of what Shanti mentioned. It comes on the top of venture capital round, right? So for a revenue-based financing, which is gaining steam in India as well, you need not have a venture capital, while for venture debt, you require a venture capital. So what it entails is more maturity of a company to avail that. It doesn't dilute from a perspective of the credit assessment of the companies. We need to be very sure because of the fact that venture debt lending can be a little longer tenor than revenue based. Plus it's secured lending, right? So you have to weigh the asset in a very different manner. So typically our companies would be companies which start hitting 2 crore to 3 crores of revenue a month, and can be a late stage company who can pick a higher amount of debt. But what we have seen a drastic change in the past at least 6 years of my involvement in this ecosystem, because prior to that I've been lending from the banks, that there's a lot of awareness of the founders, Rakesh, to look at alternate ways of financing. It's not only about building business and raising equity and diluting. They've started speaking a different language, which is quite music to ears for lenders to hear. They started speaking that language of what cash flow is, what working capital is, what the cyclical nature of business is, right? International financing. So I think what Stride, at least what we have done, is to ensure that we try being as innovative. I think Shanti touched upon invoice financing, supply chain financing. That's been part of our structures in venture debt already, which where we've worked with a larger institution to make a scale of debt. I think the best thing is mid-stage, late-stage companies are definitely seeing a lot of interest area in terms of looking at venture debt. That's why I've seen, I think, the acceleration in terms of numbers. I don't think we're the pioneers, but we've been slightly innovative in terms of the way we've looked at this asset class. So we've seen significant deployments, not only from us, but other players as well. I think that will really gain steam as you talk about more growth of all the companies and exits happening for venture capital investors, which will again get redeployed in various manner into the ecosystem. Right. So for venture debt, naturally you have to be venture capital backed. And that's where the limitations of at least company reaching the first institutional round and raise minimum of $4 to $5 million of capital comes in being. But post that, it can be as innovative as possible, depending on what kind of businesses we are talking about. I like to believe a D2C business requirement versus a B2B business requirement versus a agri-tech or a fintech business requirement would be absolutely different. And you should have structures as per the capabilities of what these businesses are all about. And that's where I think innovative lending will come in. It will come in terms of being founder-friendly debt. Debt as a word is used connotatively very negatively in Indian landscape, while it's a very mature way of looking at alternate financing in outside countries. And since now we're talking about more maturity of the Indian startup ecosystem coming in, you've started realizing that debt is becoming more founder friendly than what it was. So it's quite exciting times ahead in terms of alternate financing, especially on venture debt as well as other avenues what we've been speaking about, because we believe there will be a lot of founders who will be initiating a lot of good businesses.
Yeah, so interesting that you brought that up. In fact, you already covered it. I had that thought of actually picking up on how Indian society has largely been taking the word debt as, but then glad that you covered it already. It's interesting how we have just now went from a very early stage investing, which is non-dilutive, to probably a little later in that, where you still do not have a VC coming in, but you are ready, you have some cash flows, revenues coming in, and you can raise money. And then the growth and the later stage, that stride comes in. But going back to Shoma, as I was requesting earlier and asking earlier, right? If we have to again pick on the early stage where generally you and the venture center comes in the play, what are those different sources, government, private, across the landscape that you shared on your slide as well, that are available for the early stage entrepreneurs to avail?
Sure. Thank you. If I may share that slide again, so that it's easier for me to show that. So earlier I had shown, if my slide is visible, earlier I
Yes.
had shown that, what are the different funding categories or the nature of funds that are available starting from very early to all the way to the manufacturing side. So right now I have replaced them with the different funding opportunities, right? So if you see here, there are fundings like I have mentioned, like something like EIR and, fellowships and all. So these are like early stage fellowship, which are being offered both by government and non-government organizations equally. So there is like Department of Science and Technology supporting startups with a fellowship like EIR, whereas Department of Biotechnology has a fellowship like SIIP, it's called Social Innovation Immersion Program. Equally, the private organizations like Social Alpha also offers this, whereas MeitY also offers. So there are multiple organizations that offers this kind of fellowship. What it does, it basically gives a stipend every month to a particular startup. It can be very early startup, maybe within 1 or 2 years of their formation, or individual startups, and helps them to gain an access to the innovation ecosystem, where whatever plan they have, whatever idea they have, they can at least strengthen it further. They can define their deliverables as a part of that. And these are like for a particular period of time. So it is important that while you are in that particular program, it is important for the startups to also plan for the way ahead. They have to now think about what is the next, because in only EIR, it's a fellowship to the particular, you can just probably, build some plan, you can talk to people, you can do some market research, all of that. You may not have enough capital there to build a product as such. So then you have to decide what are the next opportunities following that. So the next opportunities following that, I would probably go to the next slide. So the next opportunities that follow that would be something like, again, offered by Department of Science and Technology as a Nidhi Prayas grant. It gives you around 10 lakhs rupees to build your first prototype. And it also obviously help you to reach out to different kind of service provider vendors, and it has those kind of opportunity in that fund. And then there are a whole bunch of funds available under Department of Biotechnology. If you are interesting to say here is that the funding scenario for some of the healthcare, medtech, biotech startups is very strong in our country, and it is getting stronger with a chain, with a continuum of funding available under the Department of Biotechnology. So it can completely secure you all the way to your manufacturing without having to worry about raising anything, losing any portion or share of your company. So that's very interesting funding schemes that BIRAC has, starting from their fellowship to the grants that they call as Biotechnology Ignition Grant. Then there is something called SIBRI, BIPP. Then they also have ACT Grant, which is a consortium of VCs in case they need a larger funding beyond, say, 7 to 10 crores. Even that kind of funding can also come in. Then there is like DSIR, also another Ministry of Science and Technology. They have a PRISM scheme. And the second option is the CSR. So of late, we are seeing, even, in fact, unfortunate that we are in the pandemic situation, but this has also led many of the corporates to come forward to support startup, because the kind of success MyLab, by the way, that is one of our company, that they have seen in the country, that more and more CSR is now pro to fund such kind of startups to see those disruptive technologies coming and changing lives of people. So CSR has actually been a very good resource for the kind of bridge funding, or a smaller, they don't provide a large funding for the startups at this point of time, but it is enough to basically help them reach the next milestone. So CSR can fund only not for profit. So they are able to.
If you allow me to interrupt here, I think this is very interesting point, and just want to build on top of this. Now, this is pretty interesting from the perspective. There's an abundant set of resources that is available to the early stage startups.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What I'm sure, like me, many of the people who are attending the session today would be curious. How do you really reach out to those? What is the way to get to these? Because as I think, while there is abundance, it's pretty opaque in terms of how it can be reached out to. Would you like to put some thoughts on that as well?
Sure. So you know, those, many of these funding schemes are implemented in the country via organizations like incubators and accelerators, right? So it is important that in your region, if you find any incubator, you can get associated with them. You don't need to really take very hardcore services from them, but you can be on their mailing list. You can associate with them, because those incubators actually can get information for all this funding, because government is continuously in touch with these incubators and accelerators. But other than that, there are government organizations also which are actually disseminating such information. For example, there is Startup India, right? Startup India, Invest India, then CII is there. So all these different organizations that deals with startup, they can actually reach out with this kind of information. For example, there is a
Do you
consortium of
suggest the
incubators called
entrepreneur
ISPA.
should sit on their mailing list? They should subscribe to the mailing list and
Yes.
all? Or how
Yes,
do that?
so that is very easily can be possible. They can actually reach out to any incubators that is there in their zone, and they can actually get this kind of information from via that incubator.
Interesting. And how about CSR?
Well, CSR is being funded to the incubators directly. So even there, you know, we open out calls, right? They're all national level calls. So we actually reach out to all social media platforms, to all media, print media, everywhere we reach out for that. So people, if they keep their eyes and ears open, they will be able to see such calls opening up from the incubators and all. Because startups, it is little difficult, because depending based on their, you know, stage, their credibility, they cannot directly reach out CSR. Having said that, it is also possible. We have also seen such kind of a trend, whether a corporate has identified a startup, which they found very interesting, and then they have approached that incubator to pass through their funds, right? So both were possible. So it's just that, you know, if they find any corporate and all, they might want to tie up with an NGO or an incubator to achieve those kind of funding opportunities.
This is very interesting. Very interesting. So I'm sure most of the early stage entrepreneurs who are in the audience today probably would find this very useful. But again, I probably will take a jump here back to Shanti. So Shanti, as I was mentioning earlier, right, would request you to wear the entrepreneur's hat, right, and help us understand what is the right time. Because again, fundamentally, if we look at the Indian venture or the startup growth, the first thing that comes to any new entrepreneur, particularly the first time entrepreneurs, is always equity based financing. You perhaps are the entry point to the non dilutive, other than the grant kind of scenario. What
Yes.
is the time that they actually can realize, or they need to think of and understand that they are ready for another source of funding, which could be something like what N+1 does, and how do they go about doing it?
Yeah. So, you know, if you look at, like you rightly said, when you're building a venture, I think the first source of funding which all founders look at is equity capital, right? Because at that point of time, you just have an idea. Of course, like what Soma mentioned, you can also look at those, but post that, you know, when you're actually starting to build your first POC or your first MVP, if you're not able to bootstrap your business, or your business needs a lot more investment to get it off the ground, then equity is the natural choice, right? But once you have actually hit product market fit, you have repeatable revenue. And the reason why I use the word product market fit is because product market fit is repeatable revenue, right? Which you can kind of emulate over time, right? And revenue based financing then falls into that category. And when you say repeatable revenue, it has to be about, you know, like I said, about 10 crores of ARR, right? Which is almost like about 75 lakhs to about 1 crore a month, right? When you're able to do repeatable revenue. At that point of time, when you want to raise like a 10 crore loan book, because you want to actually expand your business, and you know that that particular infusion of capital will give you immediate increase in revenue or growth, it's a very good time to go and take a revenue based financing, right? Because couple of points there. As a founder, and I actually first where the founder had before I wear the investor hat, right? Because really, you know, always looked at creating the marketplace from a founder perspective, because I believe founder actually lies at the core of that ecosystem, right? Everything, right? Venture funding, alternate sources of funding, service providers, legal services, company incorporation, everything is around the founder, right? So really kind of working to see what is the best way to continue to support the journey of the founder. And RBF is one of those instruments, right? I believe that if you don't want to dilute equity, because there is no warrant, there is no coupon there, right? So if you don't want to dilute equity, You don't want, I mean, RBF N+1 does not require board representation. So there's no control giving away. That is the second point. Third is, you can actually then get a continuous line of capital if you're able to return the capital in time, right? So then it becomes a continuous source of capital. Fourth, very, very important point is there is no personal guarantee, right? So there is no personal guarantees. You're actually putting variable monthly payment. So you are rewarded if you're able to increase your revenue much more, because it is a percentage of the revenue which you're giving away, right?
Sure.
And that makes it very, very founder friendly from a alternate capital source company. It could be a non-venture backed company. It could be anything, as long as you meet that revenue criteria. Your equity debt ratio is low, right? You have actually the your gross margins are at 25%, right? So there are some criteria which you have to meet before you go and apply for an RBF.
And what kind of percentage of revenue can one expect to be financed under RBF?
It's, I think, about 5 to 7% today.
Okay, interesting. I think that's pretty interesting.
No, 5 to 7% of your revenue is your return revenue, right? But you could get, so if you are actually doing maybe 25 crores, you could actually get up to 5 to 10 crores of financing line. So it depends on the quality
roughly
of
about 50% of the revenue.
Yes. It actually depends on a lot of other factors. This is just a high level kind of a guidance I would give.
I understand. Awesome. Thank you so much. So Ishpreet, coming back to you, looking at the venture debt as the next level, right? So a couple of things. I think one thing is the same as I asked Shanti as well. What is the time that the investor realizes that they have they have another source of funding other than the maturity of the thought process? And then how do they know they are ready for the venture debt? One, that's my first part of the question. Second, I would love to understand what are the terms that a firm like Stride works on, and what is it that the entrepreneurs have to be prepared with when they are negotiating a deal with firms like yourself?
Sure. So, Rakesh, typically, I think that's been the biggest gap of the absorption of venture lending. I think the whole aspect is the founder understanding at the right time that this is meant for me. So it requires an awareness to be created across products because look, with due respect, a founder is creating a great business. As I said, that the first focus is to make sure that it's a sustainable business, what the founder is creating, and they have the right support required. I think we've seen traditionally the terms which we are using, what I am using, or Shanti or Soma highlighted upon, are not readily available, right? It's not right in front of screen, and so many things which a founder is going through on day-to-day perspective. So I think it's a continuous process in order to understand where the business is positioned and what is that extra layer which can be replaced with debt. So as I said, depending on what business we've been talking about. Now, for example, in today's time, we see a lot of independence and awareness on consolidation of the industry, right? Because there's a lot of money chasing mid-stage and growth stage companies. And there are a lot of early stage companies who would not have got that kind of a support. So consolidation of acquisition financing has become quite important these days, which means that we've been seeing that for a lot of edtech companies, but what it traditionally means is that you're using the debt money to acquire new companies. Now, is it common? The answer is it's common as a phenomena, but if every founder is attuned or they have the right team to tell them at the right time that there are alternate ways of large capital available, which can replace your equity or protect your equity in order to make sure that you use the debt money for the acquisition. Similarly, if you're cracking some large enterprises orders, what happens is that enterprises takes time to give you money. And again, the working capital lock is the traditional lock which all the founders enter into while cracking bigger accounts for themselves. So those enterprise receivables takes a lot of time. And similarly, consumer brands, right? There's a lot of inventory buildup which happens, which on online, offline, and then receivable cycle. again, it takes its own cycle to get the money back for a turnover rotation. Now, all these things are practical to presume, but is founder realizing it on day-to-day basis, and the team is capable at all the sets to get it done for them, is where I think the awareness of the larger ecosystem comes in. So I think that's what all of us, all of the debt funds, other aspects of financing, alternate, I think we're trying to educate founders and trying to get close to them in order to make them aware that there are avenues possible, and which are anti-dilutive, non-dilutive, and doesn't require what Shanti mentioned, the guarantees like banks, right? So there are a lot of avenues possible in which you can make it happen. So that's from the founder perspective. Sorry, so the second aspect of the question you highlighted
What kind
was
of terms that you work
terms,
with,
right?
when you work with
So
entrepreneurs?
we are also typically we do take warrant position as well alongside the debt, which is very minuscule portion of the debt amount, right? Plus the no guarantees or pledges of shares of founders, which we typically we believe we are investing into a business and we should be comfortable in the cash flow position of the business and how the business unit economics are playing out. Is it contribution margin positive business or not? Gross margins are sustainable over a period of time. We presume all of the companies are burning because of the fact that they're scaling big time and they require marketing, operating expenditures, right, to take care of that, and that's where equity is getting used and deployed. But all the aspects which can be filled in with debt is what we are trying to fund. So we on the security piece, it's all around the business and not personally by holding to founders responsible for that. And then we are in mid-teen pricing. The good thing is all of us, at least on debt funds, have an appetite to support large exposures. So we can start as low as 5-7 crores and can go up to $10-12 million, which can be a fabulous support sometimes for a business which is scaling big, because the growth requirements will be increasing over a period of time. And then how to guide them in order to make sure that if they're really getting stable, to get them closer to banks without giving them those guarantees is what I think what I realize as a banker is a biggest point sometimes, which you have to work upon for founders, to make sure that you are partners for them in the journey and not only collecting interest at the end of the month. Moment you start giving that perspective of only collecting interest at the end of month and you're behaving like a lender, I think you lose the plot, and that's where the confidence gets shaken. It's very important that you treat them as enduring as what a venture capital partner would treat, in order to make sure that you grow from there. And I think we try following that to the core in order to make sure that there is receptivity of the founders and not an apprehension of not looking at an alternate source of financing and not running away from them, and realizing that there are merits to be to embracing some bit of alternate ways in terms of assets.
But what you just mentioned, Ishpreet, so on that aspect, when you were comparing it to what the venture capital firms come as other than the money, right? And this question is both to you and Shanti for that matter. Do you actually participate with the businesses beyond money, the way the VCs do, opening the doors, making the connects, helping them with the other things, and so on? Or is it just lending and waiting for the money?
So in our case, if Shanti, if that's fine, I'll just go first.
Yeah, please go ahead. We'll come to Shanti with the same question.
Yeah, so Rakesh, in our case, we have 30 plus companies now, which we've created in the last 2 years, of supported them in various elements. We've been able to get banks in touching almost half of them. So I think that's the lowest cost of financing as per me. And what I realized as an ex-banker is the limitations to scale that. It's definitely there. The banks can't fund anything and they'll coexist with you, right? So they can be complementary in this journey, but they can't cannibalize a venture debt standalone market. But it's very important to make a founder aware that if the business is the case and especially mid-stage more than early stage, then handhold them in right products across spectrum. So I think we've worked on that pretty well, and our entire core team is ex-bankers. So we've used our operating experience of banks in order to leverage that, and we've been able to do it with multiple banks, now touching 8 of them. And that's one aspect. And the second is the corporate leg, which we always develop upon. So if it's an enterprising customers, they're catering to B2B businesses, right? The enterprises connects and all that. It's very cool to us. And I like to believe with the founders do the talking on that, but I think that's very important. As I said, that it's not only relevant to give large sums of money and collect interest, but important to work closely with them. So we'll be trying at every bit in order to make it happen.
Very interesting. But that gives another question to brings another question to my head, which I will come back to you on. But then Shanti, same question to you. Do you actually
Yes.
participate with your portfolio companies other than the so-called RBF, or just the money hitting their account and looking at it coming back? Do you actually help them like the most of the other VCs try and do, opening the doors, making connects,
So if you, yeah, so if you
operational
look at,
experience?
yeah. So if you look at N+1, the partners actually come from a VC background, right? So if you look at Ashish, and if you could look at Rahul, they all actually come from the venture space background. So they are, of course, offering those introductions to the companies when they want to go raise a next larger equity round. But as of today, it is still very early days of N+1 in the RBF space, right? So we've just
Sure.
started making those investments.
Sure. And do you experience any reluctance from the entrepreneurs actually looking at the alternate sources like venture debt and RBF?
So I would actually attribute it to what Ishpreet mentioned, right? About the awareness of the founder to those alternate sources of capital. Today, I think we're just starting to see those conversations happen. I think in the next 2 years or 3 years, founders will really understand which part of the capital they fit in and then go approach those firms, right? So I think today from a founder perspective, because the noise around equity is so loud, right? That, the options of alternate financing, how else do you go build a business without giving up equity? I think that awareness and that willingness is also a little low, I feel, honestly, right? Because I think equity becomes an easier kind of way of raising capital if you're able to go and raise it, right?
Correct.
Your venture debt, or if you look at revenue-based financing, you have to still have revenue. You still have to come to a point before you can apply to those forms of capital.
Correct.
Just to add and give you some facts, Rakesh, behind it, venture debt to equity for this year as a ratio, it is not even 4% of the supply available by all the lenders, right? Which is a 15% market in US, not even a supply available, leave alone the consumption. And revenue-based financing might be less than 1%, right? So it's that kind of market we are pegged against in terms of capitalizing upon the opportunity what India presents.
I'm sure there is. So yeah, I think that's now that we are on the final leg of our conversation. I don't see many questions, but there are some questions which are in my head, and I would probably like to ask, perhaps starting with Ishpreet again. Ishpreet, we have seen in very recent times the noise around these 21, 22 unicorns in India in the recent times, right? What again an outside entrepreneur or the first time entrepreneur sees and thinks that it is probably all equity based financing. But then in your experience, would you like to quickly quote any case study that you probably can, right? Any example who probably would have used a venture debt or RBF in their life and perhaps made it to that unicorn club, or probably are getting there, and how they structure it?
No, Rakesh, glad you brought it up. And I think there's a strong misconception there. So if you see all the B2B businesses currently at unicorn stage, right, they've all taken debt. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you see the latest news, Infra.Market at 2.6, we've one of the largest exposure. There's another lender, right? They have taken lending because B2B businesses are built on debt. You can't build those businesses on equity, right? So they would be touching a serious figure of debt, and they've taken across their journey. So Infra.Market Souvik has been very beautifully placed the debt requirements across the journey from Series A to till now. And similarly for other companies, all the B2B players, right? You've seen Z2, Unicorn Club, they've taken debt, Bizongo, a lot of other companies, you name it, all the unicorn B2B businesses would have its own journey. D2C awareness have really risen manifold as well. We've supported recently companies like MyGlam, Sugar Cosmetics. Both of them have taken debt at the right stage of acquisition, right? Consolidation. And some of the D2C unicorn companies also for that matter, right? So I'm just saying that people generally go after that limelight of $150 million or $200 million, $100 million, that's more catchy. And some large investors entering. What goes behind is that built-up phase, which has resulted into they being smart about not diluting at certain milestones.
Exactly.
They're very wary of going past a certain Diwali season or a US season and then raising an equity at a different valuation, right? So I think it's not as noisy as what it is for equity, but it's definitely a building block in order to make sure that you have a sustainable business. And no, honestly speaking, I think until there's a lot of money chasing which is happening for some of the companies, especially where the revenue recognition has not happened, where the revenue are coming in, it makes absolute sense to plug in debt. And I think that awareness has really risen.
Sure. So I see a question coming in. It reads, how does the nature of the enterprise impact the source of fund is being taken? I'm not sure if I'm very clear. I'll try to read it again. How does the nature of the enterprise impact the source of fund is being taken?
Yeah, I think what the person is trying to say, Neha, right? So I think what she's trying to say, if the business, what kind of business requires what source of fund?
I assume so.
Yeah, so I think if somebody else wants to take it, but I think I touched upon it. Depending on what industry, what catalog you are in, every business would have its own customized requirement and what stage you are in. So I think it's quite different for all the stages as per me and all the businesses as per me. And that's what I think is the ecosystem of alternate financing is going into, with a lot of new players entering and a lot of evolution happening. So every business would have its own sweet spots. I think it's very important that the right awareness is created.
Sure. So Shanti, would you like to take that as well, particularly from the RBF context? What kind of enterprises, what businesses?
So RBF is agnostic. So we are willing to fund any company as long as you meet the criteria what we discussed about earlier.
Sure. Shoma, I would like to bring the next question to you, right? And this talks about the crowdfunding in India, right? So what are the different sources of crowdfunding in India available? I know that probably Shanti would have said, let's venture.
No, we are not a crowdfunding platform.
Not exactly. See, crowdfunding per se does not exist in India.
No, because we don't deal with retail investors, right? Or we don't deal with crowd. We only deal with accredited investors, because that's a very common kind of perception which people have about Let's Venture. So we are a curated, closed marketplace. So you have to get approved from the investor side to get login. Founders, it's free. But when an investor comes to Let's Venture, he has to be approved. He gets an invite from the platform. Only then he gets onboarded to the platform.
Noted. So Shoma, yeah, you were putting your thoughts on that, please.
So we really haven't seen many of our startups going for crowdfunding at that stage. It has been mostly the government, non-government grants and all. But yes, we have been hearing from people, there is a new concept of crowdfunding from the VCs as well, right? They have done. So there's one crowd which has founded one of our companies in Venture Center. And also like there are probably platforms which are like probably Wishberry and all who are also doing crowdfunding in the country.
Yeah, but if I understand right, how is the Indian regulatory system when it comes to the crowdfunding? I understand on the impact side of it, there's flexibility. But on the commercial side, how is the regulatory environment for the crowdfunding? Shanti, would you like to put some light on that?
So, crowdfunding is, from the time I started Let's Venture, I was constantly put into the crowdfunding category, which I'm actually not a crowdfunding platform. Correct. And today there is no regulation around crowdfunding. So it is still a gray area. So there's nothing which says you can't do. But I think there is a regulation which SEBI has, which actually SEBI has been very, very proactive to make the private market angel investing much easier. So they gave us the Angel AIF, right, which now allows multiple people to actually invest through one entity. So the regulations have been very progressive, right?
These are again generally the closed groups, pre-identified accredited investors.
Yes, yes.
Right. So crowdfunding, if I understand, it's like a blind date.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we have another question from Aditya here. Is the startup that raised funds from angel investor be eligible for venture debt? Ishpreet?
Yes, absolutely.
I think both of you said that. Yeah.
Ishpreet can talk about it, but
So equity, if you raised funds from angel investors, you would, at least in our thesis, you might not be eligible because you require a venture capital fund to back your first institutional round. But I think in revenue-based financing, for sure, the company gets eligible, what Shanti was mentioning.
Yes.
Sure.
It's just that we have a criteria of institutional backing, one institutional round of backing.
So is that across all venture debt funds or is it straight?
So yes, institutional backing is a must. Unless you're doing an early stage financing program which is meant around that, traditional venture debt requires one round of institutional backing.
Understood. So Aditya has a follow-up question which says, on venture debt, what is the typical range of interest rate and expected equity percentage from venture debt fund?
So we are mid-teens, Rakesh. All of us work around mid-teens, and with certain portion of warrants, which can be 10% of the debt raised. So it's practically 90% anti-dilutive, and those mid-teens is where all the firms are positioned. And I think for a non-tech startup for less than one, I think the further question of someone was less than $1 million if that's available. No, so sorry, just to complete that, mid-teens you operate at interest rate levels with certain portion of warrants.
Understood. So Saloni has come with a question, and I think I'll have Shoma look at this question and see. So Shoma, this looks more like an early stage startup question. What are the alternative sources of non-dilutive financing for a non-tech startup for less than $1 million? I know that you primarily operate in the tech and deep tech area, but still.
Yes. So, it's a little difficult because everywhere you need to establish a certain amount of novelty, right? So it has to be like differentiated from the other businesses. So it is little difficult without the tech part coming in it to establish that kind of differentiation and novelty. So in fact, we are having difficulty in helping companies which doesn't bring that element, because even though you see these government grants, like they are small scale grants and all of that, but it is non-trivial actually not to raise that kind of grant because there's a huge competition over there. So I think there has to be some elements which differentiates that business at least over the over their peers. So we have seen obviously the technology part brings in it. So I don't think I have an answer what could be the large funding options available for the non-tech ventures as such.
Sure.
Maybe we need to just figure that out.
But if I understand Shanti, she says they are sector agnostic, right? So if you have the regular flow of revenues consistent, perhaps RBF is the way to look at. The other question that I see is more towards the diversification. Somebody is looking from travel to travel content. I'm not sure who exactly I should pass this question to. So any of the panelists, would you like to pick that? It says, is there any option for fundraising for the tour operating company who would like to diversify towards travel content during pandemic? Fund for travel world is too limited. That is correct. I think that's one of the worst hit areas. Could you please guide on this? So anybody who wants to diversify from travel as such a travel agency kind of business, a travel or tour operating business to travel content. I assume it's a newer business, so I don't know if RBF or debt definitely does not fit in. So maybe between Shanti and Shoma, would you like to take that?
So I would say if the travel content is going to generate revenue, right, and that revenue has been consistent for the last 1 year, then probably you can look at RPF. But again, I don't know for sure if this would fit in, though we say that we are sector agnostic. We still want to look at, revenue associated with growth, right?
Sure. So to me, it seems like a newer business idea. Just throwing thoughts from my side, I would say it may be a good idea to look at the friends and family kind of round, get some traction and look at the other sources of funding. That's just my thought. The following question is, are incubated startups eligible for venture debt? I believe Ishpreet already answered that they look for the institutional venture capital round already done for a startup before they get to the venture debt as an option. So I believe that question is already answered. With that, we are about 3 minutes over our scheduled time. Would really like to thank all our panelists to be with us today, taking your precious time, passing this knowledge. For the audience who are here attending the session, please do know that as the alternate funding sources, SIG, there are a lot more sessions coming in. But the SIG is also trying to collate a lot of information that our panelists shared today, put together in terms of how to approach those sources, how to be ready to approach those sources, when to approach those sources, and so on. So please look forward to all those different announcements coming in from the SIG. With that, again, coming back to our
Rakesh,
panelists.
I had just last one point. You had spoken about that question that which is like, if a non-tech kind of
Yes, please.
ventures can get financing. So just had one thought there, even
Uma,
if it
your
is
video is not visible, just in case, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, actually the internet is having trouble.
Yes,
So non-tech, if they have a social impact, then I think there are a lot of opportunities that they can get funds from, say, Unlimited India and organizations like that. Completely non-tech without any impact, it's little difficult, but non-tech with social at least the social impact as the outcome of that particular venture. Then there is, organizations like Deshpande Foundation, Unlimited, they probably operate in that space. So maybe somebody can.
So they can look at both grant and CSR based funding in that case you are saying.
Grant, CSR, or even they have their own kitty to fund such kind of companies as well. So I think those organizations will be able to help.
Sure. Well, I think that's helpful. Again, thank you everyone for taking time to be with us this evening. I'm pretty sure that all the attendees have found it very valuable. We probably will keep coming back to you for your support educating our entrepreneur community. And with this, I'll probably let you go carry on with your work and wish you all the very best with what you are doing. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you again.